Hello everyone, in this video we are going to learn about data collection techniques in computer-mediated communication research and linguistic landscape research. If you are going to do research in social linguistics, this is going to be very helpful. Before we start our presentation, let us introduce ourselves first. My name is Fanza Pradhanastia with student number 139.
Hello everyone, my name is Revalina Firda Fauzia and my student ID number is 044.
Hi guys, I am Daundra Dikanzasha Aurelia with the student number 050.
Hello everyone, my name is Muhammad Aurel Elsar Zidan. You can call me Elshar or L, and my student number is 084.
And my name is Abdullah with student number 138.
Thank you everyone for the introduction. Now what are CMC and LL? So both are data collection methods in two new areas of social linguistic research. So the book is coming from 2014. So at that time they were new, but now I would say they are still recent. So CMC covers private and public communication via digital media. So as the name suggests, it is computer which is related to digital world. The data can be in the form of email, texting, social networking sites, and discussion forums like Google Classroom. Meanwhile, LL deals with language use on signs, like for example, there is a sign of food court UNESA. So the data is connected with the spatial and time of a certain place, which is dealing with real world. So now, for the similarities and the differences, I will explain it using an example to make it easy to understand. So in CMC, I would use the Google Classroom post, and for the linguistic landscape, I would use the discount sign. So now, first, both CMC and LL data consist of written language. So Google Classroom post contain text. Discount sign contain text, which is saying discount 50% as an example. And next, both methods connected with the social context. So in Google Classroom post, it means the social context is about lecturer and students. Meanwhile, in linguistic landscape, the discount sign deals with the supermarket and the product and also the customers. So the language use always connected with the social context. Next, both offer access to overwhelming amounts of data. So in this case, Google Classroom post, they don't have to be from your classrooms. You can ask others to take screenshot of their Google Classroom post if you want to do research about it. And then for the LL, since we have Android cell phone, we can take pictures and then we can get as many data as we like. And both collect data without any contact with the language users. Like example, if you take screenshot of the Google Classroom post, then you don't necessarily need a permission from the owner. And also for the linguistic landscape, you don't need to ask permission to take pictures of the discount sign. You can just take picture. And then the last one, similarity, is that both differ from traditional sites. It's different from interview where you need to meet the person, make a schedule. In this case, you don't need to make a schedule to take picture of discount sign. You don't need to make a schedule to take screenshot of the Google Classroom post. So it's very, very different from the traditional way. So now, next, what are the differences? So in CMC, the research categories is method. So in this case, in Google Classroom post, there are several types like material, assignment. So these are the metadata that are connected with the data with the Google Classroom post. So this is CMC. Now in LL, the metadata is connected with the time and the location. Like there is a discount sign in front of the hypermart, so for sure we know that it is a discount that is happening in hypermart, not in Lotte Mart. So always connected with the context, the location in this case. Next, in CMC, social media has unique communication features. Like if you use Google Classroom post, you the lecturers or even the students can use emojis, which is only available on the digital, stickers even, or even GIF. So to make it clear, I will give you an example. So first, in linguistic landscape data, there is an assembly point located near UNESA library. So this can be the type of data that you can take. So I don't ask for permission, I just take it. Okay, so that is linguistic landscape data. And next is about computer-mediated communication data, which is coming from my text, my WhatsApp message. So as you can see, there is hashtag membedakan to fix the typo from the word membawakan, which is only available in computers in CMC data. And also I use emoji, which is only available on social media. That's it from me. Now it's time for Dondra to explain in greater details about CMC.
Thank you, Fonza, for the brief explanation of our topic today. Now let me explain further on the CMC or computer-mediated communication technique even further. Let's move on to the next slide. So like Fonza has mentioned, CMC deals with the kinds of data that have a digital form. And according to John December, as cited by Becker and Christiansen, CMC is a process of human communication via computers involving people, situated in particular contexts, engaging in processes to shape media for a variety of purposes. CMC focuses on how humans interact and build relationships through various digital technologies. Next, as shown on the slide, for data for CMC, I have found out that there are 4 kinds of sources that can be used for CMC, which are chats or messengers, online learning environment or a talk page like an online study group, social media platforms or application, and 3D virtual world environments like 3D simulated games, or better known as VR. But of course, like any other data collection technique, CMC also has its data limitation, which is anything that doesn't have a digital form, like face-to-face interactions without the use of digital media, written texts that are not scanned or recorded, and activities that are not captured by digital devices. Next, on this slide, we have online observation, which refers to the process of virtually being there to watch the digital communication being done. And in doing online observations, there are 3 activities that can be done by the researchers. The first one is to revisit, which is to visit the target site regularly, learning and documenting the kinds of trend or activities that are currently being observed. The second one is roam around, which is to explore the virtual world by browsing around websites, such as profiles, threads, and user sections, which can help the researchers to gain new knowledge that can support their data. The last one is to try out, which is to try all of the experience provided by online environments, such as the search engines, user lists, statistics, and tags. Next, on this slide, we have screen data collection. Screen data refers to digital written language produced by people online. And since there are many kinds of sources, the collection of the data depends on the type of modes and environments available on the technology. For example, is applications for chatting and messaging, which can be collected easily because conversations are automatically saved in a timestamped log file. The second one is web forum pages, which can be collected through a copy-paste activity or downloaded in HTML format or link. And then the last one is contents from social networking sites, which can be saved in HTML format or link as a PDF file or as a screenshot. Next is the selection of data sampling. For CMC, we can refer to the theoretical framework by Susan Herring on computer-mediated discourse analysis. The first one is random sampling, which is randomly selecting the samples from the data available to ensure equal selection for every set of data. The second one is sampling by theme, which is useful for selecting data from discussion forums or any kind of organized streams of online discourse, like the use of hashtags in Twitter, where we can see groups of different themes compiled in various tags. The third one is sampling by time, which is necessary for longitudinal analysis. This is usually done by selecting samples at regular intervals from the archive of data, like analyzing a Zoom call at a certain timestamp. The fourth one is sampling by phenomenon, which focuses on particular features or patterns of language use. And this can include the use of emoticons or non-standard spellings like goosey for guys and real as real. And then the fifth one is sampling by individual or group, which is used to explain socio-demographic information. And this can also be used to explore members' categories in relevant online environments and to compare across individuals or group like football and basketball community, for example. And then the last one is sampling by convenience, which is to select whatever data are available. Like its name, with the sampling we can use whatever data are available in our possession. Next. On the next slide, we have research with participants. And with participants, research can be done through interviews, discussions, questionnaires, or emails. But of course, we need to have permission if we want to use the participant's statement as the data. For this, we can actually contact the participants before we conduct the research or after we did the research. For pre-research, we have to do this if the source of the data is from a private or semi-public place like emails, text messages, or social networking sites. On the other hand, for post-research, we can contact the participants if the data is from publicly accessible places where strict permission is not required, like web forums or blogs. Next, we have mode designs. In CMC, especially in sociolinguistic practice, modes act as the independent variables to be compared. There are two kinds of modes in computer-mediated communication, which are intermode and intramode design. The first one is intermode design, which compares data from two or more CMC modes in terms of one or more sociolinguistic variables while looking out for social and situational factors. As an example is a comparison between a student group chat, which is synchronous or real-time, with emails to lecturers, which are asynchronous. And then the second one is intramode, which compares data from the same CMC mode and varying social and or situational conditions, which, for example, is a comparison of spelling variation in instant messaging datasets between female and female, male and male, and female and male conversations. Next is the social identity variables. CMC can make the identification of participants and researchers harder since it is often done anonymously. And in order to counter this, there are several ways to identify social identity. The first one is by contacting relevant users and collecting relevant socio-demographic information post-research. The second one is to proceed with social identity cues given by users, which could include propositional information or virtual identities like avatars and member signatures. The third one, alternatively, we can ignore external socio-demographic categories altogether and focus more on online-specific categories like types and degrees of membership. For example, like regular versus newbies and admins versus normal users. Moving on, we have the research ethics in CMC, which is going to be explained by Elsa.
Well, thank you, Dondra, for the explanation. Now, let's imagine you comment on Instagram or Twitter or any social media. Then suddenly, you found your comments or you found them in an article or research paper without any permissions. How would you feel about that? Now, let's talk about it deeper. One of the main ethical concerns in CMC research is the tension between privacy and publicness. While protecting the privacy of informants is a legal and ethical necessity, there is no universal guideline on how to do this effectively. Ethical standards vary from country to country and even across institutions. However, a fundamental principle in CMC research is protecting the anonymity of participants. A key challenge is distinguishing between private and public data. Private data must be collected with consent, but public data is more complicated than that. Some researchers believe that screen names from public platforms can be published, while others argue that even anonymized screen names and verbatim quotes can be traced back through search engines. This raises concerns about participant anonymity. Another important factor is that not all online users want to remain anonymous in academic studies. For example, well-known bloggers may prefer to be credited for their content. Therefore, researchers must carefully consider ethical dilemmas and follow relevant ethical guidelines, such as those provided by the Association of Internet Researchers. So that's about CMC ethical considerations. Now let's move to the next material. I'll pass it over to Revalina.
Alright, thank you so much for the opportunity, Elshar. And now let's jump to the next discussion. And I would like to explain about data collection techniques in the linguistic landscape. But before we discuss the main topic, I would like to let you know the data in the linguistic landscape. So, unlike computer-mediated communication or CMC, linguistic landscape research relies heavily on physical fieldwork such as road signs, advertising billboards, street names, place names, commercial shop signs, public signs on government buildings, and etc. So the limitation of data and the source of data in the linguistic landscape research relies on physical fieldwork only. Now you guys know the data collection of the linguistic landscape, but how do we collect the data? So here are the data collection phases in the linguistic landscape research. According to Beckhouse 2007, there are 3 key steps to collecting the linguistic landscape data. The first one is determine the survey area. So the researcher has to determine on which place the research can be conducted and to collect the data. And then the second one is identify the items to be surveyed. So the researcher have to choose or determine what kind of signs that will be studied. And then the last one is define the coding categories. The last step is choosing the type of coding categories to be used to classify and analyze the data. However, Garvin 2010 give further steps in collecting data in ethnographic fieldwork. The first one is selecting sites. In this step, the researcher chooses specific location based on research studies such as exploring multilingualism or language policy, and considering the accessibility and the relevance of the research questions. The second one is photographic documentation. The researcher captures visible language in public spaces such as road signs, billboards, shop signs, and etc. using high-resolution cameras, and then archives and organize the photo using tools like photo storage software or web-based maps such as Google Maps. And then the next one is selection of and contact with participants. In this step, the researcher identifies key stakeholders such as business owners or local people who interact with or create the linguistic landscape. And then the fourth one is conducting individual walking tour interviews. So the researcher engages participants in the selected sites on the street to discuss their perceptions of the linguistic landscape. The next one is transcription and analysis of interviews and field notes. So in this step, the researcher transcribes audio recordings of interviews and organize the field notes for systematic analysis using coding categories to identify patterns and themes. And then the last one is follow-up meetings with participants. So this step is used to validate the findings and to ensure the accuracy of the findings. By doing these systematic steps, the researcher can gather the data and uncover the deeper social and political meanings behind the public signs. And then the next one is photographic documentation. Photographic documentation is one of the data collection techniques in the linguistic landscape, and it is the central point of the linguistic landscape data collection. There are a few key considerations on conducting photographic documentation. The first one is digital camera with sufficient resolution. The quality of camera has to be considered when conducting photographic documentation to ensure clear and detailed image of the signs. To ensure the textual content and the multiple elements can be seen. The next one is sequential completeness of signs. It is important to document complete sequences of signs one by one within the selected area to avoid bias or gaps in the data. And then the last one is favorable contextual condition. Capturing signs under optimal conditions such as good lighting, clear weather, and considering the angle and distance. Angle is important to be considered because it is essential to ensure readability and avoid obstruction that might block the view of signs. After finishing documentation, the researcher have to archive and display the data because it is part of the documentation process. The researcher can use photo storage software to help them organize and analyze the data, or use Google Maps or web-based map services to help the researcher visualize the spatial distribution of signs. The next data collection techniques is coding categorize. When the researcher conducting photographic documentation, it is essential to the researcher to consider which type of coding categorize that will be applied to the data collection. There are 3 varieties of coding categorize based on research focus. The first one is Sanas and Garter 2006 that focus on linguistic aspects of signs. The main categories are the type of signs, branch, number of languages on the sign, the distribution between top-down versus bottom-up signs, and the additional variables are the first language of the sign, the amount of information per language, the semantic relation between the 2 languages on the sign, and the font used on the sign. The second one is Beckhouse 2007. The categorize focus on monolingual versus multilingual languages on the sign, top-down versus bottom-up, geographic distribution, and semantic relation between language elements on the sign. And then the last one is Barney and Buckner, 2009. The categorize focus on mono versus multilingual signs, textual genre such as advertisement, warning sign, and etc. Location, domain such as educational or work-related, and place such as catering places. The next one is collecting language policy document. This technique is important because it helps the researcher to understand the regulatory and institutional frameworks that shape the linguistic landscape, such as public authority manuals regulating top-down signs and laws controlling languages on commercial signs. This technique is essential to analyze the data from the angle of language policy. Alright, the next one is involving participants in research. Involving participants is a key part of data collection techniques in the linguistic landscape research. Participant involvement includes interviews, filling questionnaires, and field notes of observations. And participant research can focus only on producers or recipients, or focus on both producers and recipients. By focusing on the people who ask or make the design of the public signs, the researcher can examine the motivations behind the language's choice and other semiotic resources. While focusing on the recipients, the researcher can undermine the different perspective in interpreting public signs. The example of participant-focused research is interviews with business owners about language choices and design. And then there are 2 interview techniques. The first one is interviewing randomly selected local people. So the researcher select the specific place and then select the random people to be interviewed. And then the second one is walking tour interviews of local people. The interview conduct while walking through the selected area and select randomly. I think that's all from me. I hope you can follow and understand my explanation well. And then the next discussion will be delivered by Elsar.
Well, thank you, Rafalina, for your explanation. Now let's talk about research ethics in linguistic landscape research, or LL research. In linguistic landscape research, ethical concerns mainly focus in the legality of photographing public spaces. In most cases, LL research involves documenting shop signs, billboards, and public notices, which is usually legal. However, there are key restrictions to keep in mind. For example, photographing military sites is strictly prohibited in many countries, and taking pictures of individuals without their permissions may also be against the law, even though most public signage are exposed in public spaces. Shop owners might feel uncomfortable, particularly if the research is in an outsider to their community, unknown people. So, to handle these ethical challenges, researchers must be mindful of local laws and cultural sensitivities. While asking every shop owner for permission might not be practical, researchers can adopt a discreet approach. For example, like taking photos during quieter times of the day to avoid drawing attention. Well, that is the ethical consideration in LL research. Now, last but not least, let's go to the conclusion with Abdullah.
Okay, so thank you, Elsar, for already explain about note on research ethic. And right now, I will conclude all of the material. First of all, the definition, like my friend Fans already explained, computer-mediated communication, CMC, and linguistic landscape, or we can say LL, are data collection methods in two new areas of sociolinguistic research. CMC is research that focuses on the digital world. On the other hand, LL is a research that focuses on the real world. Okay, I will move on to the CMC that already explained by Towndra. CMC focuses on how humans interact and build relationships through various digital technologies. The sources of data for CMC includes chats, messengers or online forums, social media platform and application, an online learning environment or a talk page, and 3D virtual world environment. And there are 5 ways to collect CMC data. The first one is online observation, and the second one is screen data collection technique, and the third one is research with participant. Okay, and last but not least is inter and intra-mode design. Okay, I think that's all from the CMC. I'm gonna move on to the LL that already explained by Revalina. LL focuses on how language construct public space and focuses on visible language in urban setting. And there are 3 steps to collect the LL data. The first one is photographic documentation, and the second one is collecting language policy document, and the third one is involving participant in research. Okay, I think that's all from the LL. So I'm gonna move on to the research ethic that already explained by my friend Elsar. So the first one is ethical issues in CMC research. There is no universal standard for protecting individual privacy in CMC research, as ethics guidelines vary across countries and institutions. Anonymity must be maintained by avoiding disclosure of offline identities and clues that could identify informants. And the second one is ethical issues in LL research. LL research, which involve photographing public signage, is usually legally acceptable but has limitation. I think that's all to wrap all the things up. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.